looking around and trying to make sense of the world and what's going on. And see, they're very deeply rooted habitual ways of order, trying to make sense of it all. And a lot of the hard to grasp the exact significance of it, but a lot of it I would assume has to do with survival, learning to get by as the being that one finds oneself as embodied. And in physics, there's a principle of force set in motion, a continuous and interrupted by another force. So you said many times that only the noticing of the context of the space you cause really undermines that scientific foundation. Because you would acknowledge that, relatively speaking, it does have quite a force. So I said drives the mind from lifetime to lifetime.
Well, maybe so. We don't know about lifetime from lifetime, but certainly it's an obvious functionality that spontaneously shows up. So the mind or consciousness or what have you. Anyway, there is this principle, this functionality of being able to and being motivated to look at experience and parse it, put it into some degree of order or forms or so on and so forth, categorize it in various ways, into various degrees. Exactly so. And there's nothing wrong with this categorization as far as it goes. The problem is it does not go very far. And this is in that recognizing that fact is what noticing is all about. Recognizing the limitations of analysis, the limitations of orientation, the limitations of description and worldview, and hypotheses of what one is and where one is and what's happening. All of this functionality, as mind-bogglingly spontaneous and powerful as it is limited. It does not actually capture reality. It may be useful in various ways and so on and so forth, as you say, in terms of survival and all that. But the jury's out on that. But at any rate, it's certainly a phenomenon that is very commonplace and that all people spontaneously seem to find themselves falling into. The problem is that there's also, from a spiritual point of view, it's a dead end, it's a trap, because you can't get out of it once you're in it. Of course, you never are actually in it, but you may think you're in it, which is the whole nature of what is called delusion. Delusion consists simply of believing your own version of things.
Peter, just seems so fun. As I mentioned at the cafe, my friend's father died this morning. 86 years of someone who was born with certain experiences, had a whole sense of reality, and then it's gone. I'm more and more having memories of very early on in my life, and it all seems so strange and overwhelming.
Sure.
And the sense of that absence of noticing this higher nature, radiance, whatever, things will just spin out endlessly. And that is so in my face obvious.
The habit of mind to immerse itself in this categorization is a spontaneous and ongoing engagement. But again, it's not accurate. What it implies is it implies a limitation which doesn't actually exist. And for a spiritual point of view, noticing the truth of that fact is is the whole ballgame. That's the entire nature of spirituality, is discovering that actuality completely transcends what we're used to thinking of it as. And as you say, when we're small infants, we know this. We look at this and we go, wow! Yeah. You don't know what anything is. You don't have a clue what anything is. It's just, wow, what is all this? Too much. It never changed. You still don't know what anything is, right? But the mind pretends it does through dazzling itself with its own bullshit, essentially. Through learning all of these labels and descriptions and being facile with being able to describe things and communicate with things and, discuss theories, all of which are just different ways of juggling these labels. And at no point do they actually engage with the actualities that the labels are supposed to refer to. And the actualities are always this fundamental, actual, wow. What is color? What is light? What is form? What is energy? What is, an experience? Any aspect of experience itself is completely mind-boggling. Obviously so.
It seems there's also as part of that, there's a cultural, a societal aspect. I was born in 1958. My parents were Jewish, and so I found out in the Jewish culture, there's different, within any culture, there's different pockets of collective ways of identifying and perceiving. I guess that's more superficial, but it's nonetheless sort of tangible. I can feel how that colors the mind.
Well, it does color the mind, but even there, that you have to be careful to see what's actually happening. Functionality happens through subtle energy engagement. Functionality does not happen through conceptualization. So when you relate to someone, you're actually relating to them through a subtle energy engagement. It may look like you're talking to them. It may look like you're moving your body in certain ways, but in actuality, it's all subtle energy engagement. You know your family, you know your tribe through subtle energy engagement, flavor, smell, what have you. It's just a knowing of a sea of tangibility, of tangible quality, that none of which you can actually say what it is, none of which you can actually pin down, but it's totally knowable and recognizable, and hence engageable with. And all human functioning is actually occurs on the level of subtle energy engagement. The mind gives life to that because we describe things and we pretend, the rational mind pretends to be so functional because we know what I'm doing, I know what I'm doing. I'm reaching my hands and I'm picking up this glass of water and I'm bringing it up to my lips and I'm sensing the temperature's good. I'm not going to burn myself. I'm taking a sip. So because I can spew all that bullshit, it sounds like that's what I'm doing. But that's not what I'm doing. How do I do that? How do I do this? I can do that effortlessly. It's not being done with words. It's not being done with ideas. It's direct energy engagement. Experience is a contact sport. Experience is a direct energy engagement, and all human functioning actually occurs on that level. And words are just like a Greek chorus narrating in the background that has nothing to do with any of the actual activity, the actual functionality. And again, so you talk about things like culture, you talk about things like, sense of identity and all these things. These are actually subtle energy functionalities that can have a layer of, analytical description seemingly applied to them, but it doesn't actually stick. It doesn't actually have anything to do with it.
In a way, the world is sort of acting from its own side to mold one. This is who you are. This is what's important. This is what you like. And that not so much verbally, but energetically.
Well, of course it is. The world is. The world's a Skinner box. You know what a Skinner box is?
That was he was a psychologist.
Yeah. The world is a Skinner box. For those of you who don't know what a Skinner box is, anyway, it's unimportant. The world is, this gets into the nature of karma. which is that why are you the particular energy system that you are? Why is your life that you were born into the particular energy system that it is? And why has the ongoing interface or dance of the energy system you are and the energy system of the world you were born into, as it evolves and intensively interacts and moves into ongoingly as your life, what's up with that? What's happening there? Well, what is that? Well, you can't say what it is, of course, but it is in the nature of what you are that it looks like that. The important thing to discover, and this is discoverable obviously and self-verifyingly with direct experience, that what you are is not actually, let's say, it transcends all of that level of engagement. That level of engagement is occurring, but it doesn't actually impact what you are. What you are is not, even as the energy dance occurs of you and your life interacting and seemingly developing or progressing anyway, right? Even as that occurs, apparitionally, it doesn't impact anything. It's very much like a dream. You have a dream at night, and the dream seems to have all sorts of eventfulness and all sorts of importance and all sorts of intensities and emotionality and so on. But the dreamer is not affected by the dream. The dreamer transcends the dream. The dreamer is not in the dream. The dreamer is just experiencing the dream. Now, what's up with that? Why is it like that? Well, you can't say. You can't say what's with all this karma. You can't say what's with all of this, all this sound and fury signifying nothing. So, but the important thing to discover is that what you are, what this is this doing itself, and as it doing itself, it is, you could say it's engaged in its own transcendental process, if you will. We can speculate. We can't say what that is, so it's all bullshit, even just to say that. But it is ongoingly that. It is perfectly that. It is not damaged or improved by what seems to happen. And what seems to happen is part of its is not part of, but is the nature of its intrinsic process.
Again, I'm just speaking relatively, but what if, let's say, a major screw-up, a major breaking of a track, let's say at a certain point in the continuity of one's evolution, or one's stream of lifetimes, there's very heavy transgressions that were empathetic in school.
There's no such thing. There's no transgressions. There's no right way and wrong way to do it. If it happens the wrong way, then that's the right way. If it happens the wrong way, then that wrong way is what it needs to be to affect its process, which is entirely indescribable and transcendental. Its process, if it looks like failure, that may be its process, is to look like failure. So it's not a failure that it looks like failure, it's actually a success. From a human point of view, we have very simplistic, ideas, fantasies about values, the value system. The intrinsic value system of reality is unaccessible from a human framework. No one can say what's good or bad, or what should be or what shouldn't be.
I'm talking about, like, we read certain texts that one, say, in a moment of weakness feels, and that the next 500 lifetimes is born in poverty, things like that.
If that occurs, and if that description is accurate, then what's wrong with 500 lifetimes of poverty? Maybe it's a condition profoundly to be wished for.
Well, no opportunity to even hear these types of teachings. No opportunity to do anything other than survive.
Sure, maybe so. But again, from what frame of reference, from what vantage point can you look at that and say, that's not desirable, it would be better if it was some other way? We can't say. I mean, spirituality, what I offer and advocate here, what I call this yoga of radiant presence, is a shortcut. But that doesn't make it a good thing. It's like a loophole. It's like a loophole in tax law. The taxes say you have to pay your taxes, but there's one loophole. By the way, you don't really. And well, that's kind of good news. And if you jump on that and take advantage of it, then you get to take advantage of the loophole. So this yoga is like that. It's like a loophole. So it's a way to slip through the cracks. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. You can't say, but it is a doable thing. And so if you find yourself interested, if you're karmically situated in such a way that you are, even aware of this existing and interested in it, then that right away means that, well, maybe you can, take advantage of this loophole. And whether or not that's a good thing, you can decide for yourself. But good or bad is not, desirable and undesirable is not accessible from within a human framework. Totally not accessible. You cannot say. You cannot say, 500 lifetimes, in hell is not a good thing. Who knows? Relative to what?
Well, relative to what one would wish.
Yes, relative to what one would wish.
Which is not to suffer.
Yeah, sure. But clearly life has other ideas about that, doesn't it? And is life wrong? Can life be wrong? Can reality be wrong? Just because we don't like suffering doesn't mean, maybe in some scheme of things, suffering is really, really good. I mean, ask a lot of Buddhists, ask a lot of Christians, it's so good, burning off all this karma.
Well, I mean, the classical view is that one undertakes the spiritual path because one has heard that life is suffering, there's a cause, and so forth.
All this, kind of stuff, but it's all theory. It's all a hypothesis. It's all a pretty story. It's not true.
Ultimately.
Yes, ultimately, and there's nothing but ultimately. I mean, anything other than ultimately is just more spin doctrine. So ultimately is the only vantage point that's relevant, and the ultimate vantage point cannot be accessed from within a human framework. It cannot be expressed in words, cannot be thought in words, cannot be described.
Yeah, Buddha would not describe in positive terms what Nirvana was.
I mean, what's good is radiance, and there's nothing but. And what we think of as suffering is made of radiance, just like what we think of as pleasure or ecstasy or success is made of radiance. So from the point of view of radiance, it doesn't give a shit. From the point of view of universal energy or galactic energy, it doesn't care if the sun shines or it explodes. It's all the same to it. It's all just within the parameters of this doing what it does. And we say, oh no, the sun's much better. If it shines, it shouldn't explode. That would be terrible. But that's a very warped partial perspective. It's just says who? The universe doesn't say that, or it wouldn't be blowing up suns all over, left, right, and center.
Says the word partial.
Yeah, exactly. And any partial perspective is delusion. And basically any perspective is a partial perspective. Because reality itself, the actual perspective, doesn't look like a perspective because it's too weird. It's way too nonlinear. Go out to hardcore psychosis and keep going and hang a left and what's happening right here, right now, completely obviously and explicitly, is absolutely miraculous and absolutely inconceivable. There's no way you can wrap your head around it. You can be clever and come up with all sorts of fancy words and descriptions and write books about it and so on and so forth, but it's all hot air. But you have the real thing right here. It's completely exposed, completely actual, completely explicit. So you can check it out. You can look at it very directly, poke at it, prod at it, you know. This is the laboratory right here. Reality is right here. You can examine it, and it will verify that it is what it is, which is absolutely inconceivable. That it's doing itself. It's completely transcendental in the sense that it completely transcends all description, all rationale, all process. It looks like any and all process. It does process and rationale and all that, just as an afterthought, effortlessly, as a byproduct of what it's doing. But what it's doing is not constrained by that. What it's doing is absolutely inconceivable, and yet is absolutely actual. And it's right here. This is it. This is reality. And you cannot find a boundary between you and experience. You are the full field of your experience. What's up with that? How does that work? So here's this field of experience. You are the only observer within the entire field of experience. You're the only conscious entity that inhabits your universe. Everything else is just an apparition. Even your body and your circumstance and your mind and your thoughts is just an apparition to your perceiving power, which solely exists in your universe.
How come you can say all that?
Well, it's a lie, of course, but it's a
lie.
Sure, but it's an evocative lie.
Well, but
it's a lie. It's a lie that undercuts a lot of more convoluted lies.
Yeah, but it's all like stacked up. Like there's a you and a consciousness and a this and a that.
Yeah.
It's all mush.
Yeah, it's all mush.
It's just. So how is that evocative?
Huh?
How it's sort of unevocative.
Well, then it's unevocative. It's evocative of unevocativeness.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing here.
But it's not nothing.
No, there's nothing in the way. There's nothing.
Right.
There's.
Yeah, but to be doing that, to be that, and there's no reason not to suppose it's not always like that, because we used to orient towards our life as an event in time, and it has a birth and a death and a certain duration and all that. But experientially, there's only the present instant that is continually morphing, continually developing, and there's no reason not to suppose that will always be the case.
It seems like a flavor is like almost how I can't explain it. But when I feel that, it's almost like a joy beyond joy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in all the spiritual traditions they talk about the bliss and and this is absolutely true. I mean, just the quality of reality is inconceivably meaningful, profound.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so far beyond being able to react to by laughing or weeping or something. That's just kid stuff, the lusciousness of this profundity, explicitly, is just never ending. Thanks so much. Mm-hmm. But its language is flavor, is texture. Its language is essentially aesthetic. I mean, it's the absolutely simplest yoga, and it's the essence of all yoga. It's just appreciating texture, appreciating flavor of experience, and immediately you are in contact with actuality, you are in contact with the transcendental, and you are completely beyond any rational frame of reference or frame of describability. And just that engagement spontaneously deepens. It spontaneously seduces or invites or draws or opens to more, right? Yeah. And it's not, I mean, we think of, in spirituality as sort of a specific thing, but all human evolution is essentially the same thing. As one becomes an artist or becomes, more sensitive to the subtleties of experience, it's always essentially nothing other than this opening to the aesthetic, opening to the profundity of just experiential qualities themselves, nakedly, beyond analysis, not in terms of analyzing them or having theories about them, but just this direct immersion, direct energy engagement. And, as an artist, one produces these textures, one perceives these textures, one engages with all this texturality in all kinds of ways. And it's not either active or passive. It's just all action, all experience, whether it seems to be you participating actively or you, more perceiving passively. It becomes a very arbitrary distinction, and it's basically just an opening to this lusciousness, this inconceivable, very direct, very actual richness of the aesthetic qualities of experience itself, which are infinite. They reveal infinity. I mean, really obviously.
Peter, I see there's a wheel of life, that in the Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's not content of that, but
Sure.
Anyway, the traditional teaching on that is that the mind stream, or the round of birth and death, samsara,
Mm-hmm.
has no beginning. It cannot be traced to a beginning point.
Right.
Does that? How can that be understood in some useful way?
Seeing that is truly the case is liberation. Because since it has no beginning and no end, it's irrelevant. It's not something that can be started or stopped. It's like we were talking about a while back with all this seeming karmic event. The fact that you happen to be the energy system you happen to be and happen to seem to be embedded in this infinite but specific energy, of your life and your environment and your karmic path and your abilities and your challenges and so on, however you want to characterize them, right? The fact that is the case is without beginning and without end, and ultimately without relevance. And that, discovering that is the case, is liberation. Liberation is not erasing it or causing it to cease or doing anything about it. It's just discovering that it just doesn't matter. It's very much like when you're dreaming at night. When you discover you're dreaming, all of a sudden what you happen to be dreaming about is irrelevant. Who gives a shit? It's just a dream. When we're erroneously interpreting our relationship to waking life as being some kind of a limitation or a causal embeddedment, where we're embedded in it or stuck in it, or we have to somehow do something about it, that's what bondage looks like. That's what confusion looks like, delusion. But the fact is, it's completely irrelevant because you aren't actually in it. It's in you, and it's actually a very small portion of what's in you. If you take an inventory of the full field of your experience, the experience of your waking life is it's a tiny little part of it. It's as if you had a computer screen and there was like one little window open on the bottom corner of the screen, showing hells or something horrible, some ugly picture, dog shit or whatever. It's like, who cares? Because it's just a little picture, and this, there's all the rest of the space. It's not, the computer's not stuck in the picture. On the contrary, the picture's appearing in the computer. So the computer's not limited or hampered by the fact that this picture is appearing. And likewise, if you look at your experience, what it actually consists of, your experience is fast, 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 fast. And your sensory world is small. And you know, you actually are a very different being. You're a very different energy system on all these different levels of your own, call it subtle energy system, or what have you, if you wish. So in all of these different experiences, like you're a different person in your dreams perhaps than you are in your waking life, let's say. Or in your deep sleep you may be a completely different person, and so on and so forth. Just to characterize it in terms of personality, but obviously that's very partial. So you are a vast system within which small apparent subsystems are appearing, and in no way is the vast system limited by these small subsystems that are appearing in it. You know, your life is appearing in you. You're not appearing in your life. You're not stuck in your life. You are this actuality, this transcendental field of experience, a very small portion of which looks like your waking life.
Well, I guess the essence of a samskara is that the karmic imprint is interpretation or misinterpretation.
Yes.
Ways of receiving.
Yes, exactly so.
So that's what's carried in the mind. The body is the vessel or the repository of that web of perceptual.
Yeah, and the body-mind, you know, is a sort of an integral system that all reinforces this habitual tendency, because the thoughts are, of course, encoded as biochemical patterns in the neurons and what have you, blah blah blah. So as the body is going on, these habitual patternings are sort of there. In some sense, they're being reified, or the habituality is not strictly conceptual. You know, in some sense, it's embodied in a more than just in a you know, some kind of an integral sense. But even as such, even that being the case, it's no limitation to you, because you aren't in the body. The body is in you, and the body is a relatively small portion of what's in you. You know, look at your body, look at your environment, look at your history, and look what it's appearing in. And you will, if you look very closely, specifically, not in the abstract, but concretely at what it's appearing in, you'll discover that it's small and what it's appearing in is vast. Mm-hmm.
I do, it's been happening for some time, but more and more, I really sense that the dynamics of mind that generate the dream experience.
Mm-hmm. Let's call it Mercury. There's one thing here that, in actuality, there's only one thing here. It's good, I call it radiance. Just because that sort of describes its mode of activity.
You know, the mind is like a filter that will project the different tones and.
Well, perhaps so, but that can't be pinned down. Anyway, it's all interactive with itself. The mind is itself radiance, and the radiance is one with the mind. Mind is one with the radiance, and radiance is one with the mind. So it's not like the radiance is over here and the mind's over here doing something to the radiance. But we can look at it in those terms.
The experience of confinement.
Right. Yeah. That's the radiance as mind misinterpreting the radiance as presence. See, radiance is just present, and in the presence it presents radiance has infinite degrees of apparent qualitativeness that it presents as. But that's all. And then the mind takes this qualitativeness and collapses it down to objects and events and times and transitions and actions and so on.
There's a great deal of force,
a great deal of apparent validity, but the operative word there is apparent. It borrows from its own actuality to make its point, to be so convincing. Radiance is actual, so it's easy for it to seem actual. When you feel something that's hard, you feel something that's hard, the hardness is not in the thing, the hardness is in your experience. It's the radiance that can appear as hard. When you see something bright, it's the radiance that can appear as bright. When you see something very dark, it's the radiance that can appear as dark.
The force of desire, whatever it might be, I came head to head with it a few weeks ago. My son, which can be called luminosity or radiance, seen up there, and absolutely mind is unable to, even for a moment, recognize that it's the nature of oneself or presence.
Right.
It seems so gap between oneself and the magnificent appearance.
Absolutely. And if you look at dreams, this is really clear and obvious. A dream is something that seems to be so specific and so objective and so actual, and it can really just be, really there in all of its objective splendor, and there's absolutely nothing present. There's no objectivity there whatsoever. Dreams can convey that really thoroughly. It's hard to look at the waking state from outside, from within the waking state. But when you go to sleep, if you could look back from the sleep state to the waking state, it would look exactly like a dream. This world completely disappears when you go to sleep. Just like a dream completely disappears when you wake up. But because you're here seemingly in this world, it's hard to recognize that. It's hard because it's hard to see this from outside when you're seemingly inside it. And of course we experience the same thing with dreams. When you're in a dream, it's hard to recognize it as a dream for most people, You may have moments or periods of lucidity or develop that as a talent of being able to be lucid in your dreams all the time. But still in all, it's very easy to be in a dream and not recognize that it's a dream and just be pulled into it. And which we all experience in the waking condition as well. But the waking condition is no more objective than a dream is. I mean, there's no such thing as objectivity, or for that matter, there's no such thing as subjectivity. The only actual condition is transcendental radiance, which is not outside or inside. It's nowhere and everywhere, so on and so forth. So it sounds like a writer of Genesis when you start talking about what it really is. Funny about that. In the beginning was the Word. The Lord said, "Let there be light."
Actually, the term radiance is just as empty as every other term.
Of course.
It's just another...
More bullshit.
Yeah.
And obviously, the words don't capture it. The words would mean nothing to it. But there is an intrinsic dynamism to being, an intrinsic dynamism to actuality. Reality is doing. Being is not an inert sitting that's sitting there, that's somehow over there that you have to somehow go to. On the contrary, it's always forcing itself upon you. I mean, that's obviously very poetic and inaccurate, but there's a sense that it's dynamic. It is an activity. It is a dynamism. It is a positivity. Which is why I like this word radiance, because it implies that actually in itself it defines nothing, of course, but it somehow resonates to some degree with this this actual primal positivity of reality, which is I call it primal, and it is extremely primal. In Kashmir Shaivism, sensing or noticing or being with this, the activity of reality is considered the supreme yoga, the easy yoga, because all you do is just feel the dynamism, the actuality of the dynamism, call it the creativity or the unstoppability of being, and it's the very, very, very core of reality. It's not some superficial quality that, oh, isn't that interesting? On the contrary, it's the very lifeblood, the very essence of, what in India is called Shakti, the creative energy of reality itself. I mean, and this is actually it. The positivity of this here, simple, present, everyday, normal reality. This beingness of your present experience is that primal Shakti, that primal creativity, that primal positivity of reality itself. And simply feeling that, you're feeling the very core of reality. Yeah.
Is the primal Shakti, is it Atman?
Yes, one and the same. Because there's no separation of the nature and its activity. They're one and the same. In some traditions they say Shiva and Shakti are one, so on and so forth. I mean, there's lots of different ways it's put in the different traditions, but that's not important. The point is the actuality, which is, this reality itself is intrinsically positive, intrinsically creative, intrinsically a dynamism. It's not like reality is here and it's somehow a dynamism is occurring because reality is here. Reality is the dynamism. Reality is doing itself.
And then there's knowing.
Yes, and the knowing and the doing are one and the same. It's not like the doing's over here and the knowing's over here. So that's why the Atman, which is the knower, and the doer are one and the same.
Oh, so soul.
Sure, you can call it that, yeah. I mean, there's lots of different ways to put it, but it's not important how we put it, because the important thing is the actuality right here, which is one thing. It's integral. It has no parts. It has no process. It's not a mechanism.
It's everything.
Yes, everything. It's everything and the knowing of everything as a unity.
Right there is like I was trying to describe that I feel like I'm always in prayer and always in meditation, and it's
Sure.
right there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, because you can
Already be in my thinking.
Yeah, it's quite possible, yeah. I mean, the trick of it is spontaneous. It's subtle. I mean, you could say, well, you got to do it. It just has to happen spontaneously. So I can't do it. So you're kind of, but that's not true. That's not true either.
Right, that'd be another distancing.
Yeah, it's another distancing, and that itself is a rationalization.
Yeah.
In actual fact, it's possible somehow to directly engage with this intentionally. To let yourself just sort of, to let yourself notice, to let yourself appreciate. It does happen spontaneously. You can't make it happen. But on the other hand, it's always happening spontaneously, so it is actually possible to tune into it. And again, as you say, it's quite possible to be self-defeating by turning it into a mental
thing.
thing.
To do.
Yeah, which is self-defeating. It's kind of an art. You have to stumble onto it. It's like learning to have fun or learning to dance or something. If you go about it mechanically or rationally, you're doomed. But if you discover the art of just sort of easing into it and letting it happen and sort of letting it show you how to work it, then it's actually quite doable.
I found in my experience, actually, lately, that thing you talk about, subtle engagement. I have the experience of the deliciousness of subtle.
Everyone does, yeah. We all do.
And then then, especially if it's in reaction to beauty or something, then there's a narrative that kicks in. Where if it's got to do with location, well then I should be in that location, or if it has to do with a woman, I should be with this woman.
Right.
So the narrative kicks in, which is also the radiance, right? It's just a little part of the screen up in the little.
Yeah. The trick is, don't make it into an either or. If the narrative kicks in, that's fine. And if the narrative even sucks you into it totally, that's fine too. So the whole trick with noticing is hit on it when it happens, and then when you find yourself drifting from it, let go. Just be real easy with it. Let go. Don't try to cling to it. Clinging to it will kill it, because clinging to it right away is intrinsically a construct of rationality.
And it feels different in the body.
Yeah, everywhere. It's a different energy. So the trick is the whole trick with noticing is to be playful, be loose. So you really enjoy it and hit on it when it happens, and then like, woo, there I go, I'm so lost again, I'm a madman. It's like, okay, cool. And you go off, because that's okay, because that happens, and then you go back to the noticing, and it sort of will waft around like crazy, but experience wafts around anyway. It's very inconstant, it's very unstable. But if you look closely at your moment-to-moment experience, your attention flits around like a butterfly or something, it's very unstable. But nonetheless, in the long run, sort of tuning into noticing when it happens, and then being loose with it, and not trying to ossify it or solidify it too much, you will discover, you will notice that there's a way in which it kind of begins to permeate spontaneously. Your whole sort of center of gravity and your orientation of your experience begins to kind of shift or settle or something. I mean, it's indescribable, but it is in actuality. And it's actually quite easy and fun, too. It's really just giving yourself permission to trip on your own experience, to enjoy it, to just have fun with it. And the rational mode of being with experience, we're kind of clinging really tight to everything. Whether we know it or not, we are, And this is just letting yourself out to play every once in a while. And it turns out to be the playful mode, the noticing mode, is actually much more functional and powerful and nourishing and integrative and empowering than the rational mode. And as one discovers this, as one begins to settle into it, it becomes really seductive. It's like, wow, this is great, yeah!
Just noticing that you're alive.
That's all it is. That's all it is. It's that simple, really. This is life.
While alive, that is.
Yeah, this is life. Feel it.
Yeah.
Dig it. Enjoy. Drink it. You are, so you may as well enjoy it, right? There's no off switch.
And then that which is uptight or contracted or whatever the hell that is, but that's just happening at the same time.
Sure, it's not important.
Yeah.
We give that importance by trying to get out of it, by making it the enemy. But it just doesn't matter. It's just our own cussedness. It's our own stubbornness. It's our own childishness. It's well intentioned. I mean, we learned that our rational mind was developed as we were maturing. And, it was us striving to be the best we could be for ourselves. But you reach a certain point where you realize you've kind of worked yourself into a corner. And in actuality, you can be the best for yourself by backing out of that corner at a certain point of realizing that fact. And that's kind of what this is about. But it's not, but the rational mind is not an enemy. It's just, it was a well-intentioned strategy that it can only go so far. And there are alternatives that are readily available that go farther.
That's must have what you're saying about the pictures, like the little crazy man before.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as one settles into the fullness of one's actual experience, the conscious mind just is seen more and more as this little tiny layer, this small, thin thin subsystem that doesn't really have much to do with anything. You know, and it's not a problem, but it's always there. You know, and sometimes it's more invasive than other times, but it's just a little subsystem. It doesn't really have any power. It doesn't have much, you know, much to do with anything, really. We never were our conscious minds. You know, we never were that. We just got distracted into being able to think we were.
So, Peter, the framework of traditional approaches, which is linear and rational, you are essentially saying you need to overcome your mind and realize nirvana, or
Right.
you are somewhere
Right.
in your salvation.
Right.
It's speaking in terms that are familiar. It's
Yeah.
using conventional language. But
Yeah, and that's the problem. You can't describe or explain or you know convey how to with regard to transcendence from within a realm of rationality.
Right. The only way to grok it is to grok it.
Yeah, which is fundamentally irrational, or you could say transrational.
So maybe these things are just like the best that they can do in a particular context.
Oh yeah, I mean they're fine as far as they go. As far as rational descriptions, Buddhism has a lot to go for it. That's not very useful when it gets down to actually doing it.
So someone like Longtempa comes along and
Yeah.
gets right with that.
But he was a genius. He was an artist. He could be hyper rational and be talking about the completely transrational with astounding lucidity. But that happens very rarely.
It does seem that fear and safety really do put a damper on things.
Sure, of course. But this is, clinging to erroneous ideas. And, it does take a certain courageousness, or at least, let's say, adventuresomeness, or the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, to find yourself, enabling yourself to get outside the box of the familiar. And, at first it might seem weird or threatening, or wait a minute. You mean you're asking me to just go crazy, or whatever?
Right.
It can seem really threatening, but when you actually, after you build up just even a little bit of experiential time, so to speak, of experiential engagement with reality, you discover, on the contrary, from being threatening, it's very nourishing, and it's luscious, and it's empowering. It's a plus in every way, and there's nothing fearful there to be found. On the contrary, there's literally, it's impossible to find anything to be afraid of, as contrasted with the rational mind, which splits things into the good and the bad, the desirable and the undesirable, the safe and the dangerous. In reality, there's no danger. In deep sleep, there's no danger. Right? Reality is just like deep sleep. It just looks like this. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. It's been a pleasure being with you. It's quitting time at the zoo, so...
Bravo.